So hello, my name is Grzegorz Mazur, and my speech is about going multi-platform. It will be like something like Crusher Enemies and also the Insult Simulator Tech Postmortem. I will give you some examples of what was challenging for us and how we worked with it. It's really weird, I don't see you, but I hope there is someone there. Okay, but quickly, who we are. So we are Monarch. Usually at this point I ask if there is anyone who knows us, but I don't see your hands at all, so it doesn't matter, I think. Okay, there is someone, great. So we are from Warsaw, from Poland. We started the company with my friend around 3.5 years ago. So we were 2 guys at the beginning, now we are 25, I think. Yeah. So we put out a couple of games. So this is the topic for today. First game was Crash for Enemies, which is a tiny RTS game where we wanted to put a experience from big RTSs into small short battles on small levels. The other game was also the Insult Simulator, our most successful game so far. It was Monty Python inspired game where 2 gentlemen try to insult each other without using curse words, but in a Monty Python absurd way, like your mother is your father or something like that. So it was the biggest success that we decided to do a next game in the series called Also the Hollywood Roast. It is also out already. This time it's not Monty Python style, it's more like a Hollywood style when you have characters that are similar to the real characters from movies, as you probably see. So we sold like around 500,000 copies of the whole series, so it's quite good. Maybe there will be another game in the series, I don't know. And you think we just announced like on Monday our next game, so it's a totally different thing. Wheatcraft Incorporated. This time it's a business tycoon, much bigger game as for us because like 17 people work on that since 2 years. So yeah, it's about marijuana business in US when you can cultivate, distribute it both legally, illegally. So we want to portray how it looks like in US nowadays through game mechanics. But this is not the topic for today. Well, too long introduction maybe. So, so I'm out of the bosses and a technical director at Monarch. Previously, I worked at 11-bit Studios, or as a programmer of This War of Mine, for example, in Sleepwalker's Journey. I'm also a lecturer. I teach game programming. I'm a musician. Here's my email and Twitter if you want to talk, work with us, do whatever. Feel free to write me. So yeah, these were the games at 11-bit Studios. Okay, but jumping to the topic. Okay, I will run quickly because we have a lot to tell you. So I wanted to tell you about our first 2 games, Crash for Enemies and Insult Simulator. Games were totally different genres, totally different things, but they had a lot of things in common. First of all, both were done in Unity, and both of these were launched simultaneously on Steam, which in the case of these games was PC, Mac, and Linux, on Android or for Google Play, and on the App Store on iOS and Mac. Later we put Insult Simulator to consoles, but it's a totally different topic. So both games were done by around 3 to 4 people, so it was a really small team. Crash Enemies was much bigger game, but we just have a longer development time. It took around a year, and Ulcer was done in half a year. Both games are in pixel art, which is also important for this talk, and both games have quite many game modes, like single player, local multiplayer, and cross-platform online multiplayer. So this is all the similarities, and actually these were the challenges. So I could say that multi-platform is at the same time is really bad idea. First of all, we have really long build and upload phase. As you can see, if you launch for that many platforms, you have to prepare 6 different builds. So even if the game is really small, and these games were small, doing builds for all the platforms, it's like a whole day of building, because you later have to upload these builds to Steam, to App Store. On App Store you have certification, and it takes a lot of time. Then you have to test, of course, before uploading. You have to test all of the builds. So it's like a QA nightmare. You have to test everything 6 times because it happens that some features can broke on only one platform. It happened many times for us. So far too many different screen resolutions. If you go to Steam only, for example, you can focus on 60:9 on full HD and you will cover most of the screens probably, but on Android you have all the different weird resolutions from really small to really big one, different aspect ratios. So yeah, this is getting hard, which is even harder with pixel art. You have, of course, different input systems. So not only keyboard and mouse, but also touchscreen, which is a totally different way of controlling your game. So you have to actually do your input 2 times or 3 times. You have different hardware limitations. Even with the games small like that, on PC there were no limitations for us because the machines are really strong already. But if you launch, for example, on iOS or on Android, you still have these limitations, right? On iOS you have limitations. It's really easy to hit the limits of the memory, right? And we did it, and game was crashing. So, so even if you're doing small game, small indie game, and you go to mobile, you still have hardware limitations which you have to think about. And fix for one platform can ruin other platform. It also happened to us a lot of times. So that's why you have to test all the builds. Yeah, sometimes, for example, one platform can have some, you need to do something for one platform and it will break the game for the other. So we had a lot of such cases. So after doing this for the second time with Insult Simulator, I thought myself, no, never again. It's like really hard. It's like it's not doing a game actually. It's like only production nightmare. So we thought, hey, let's not do this again. Let's do it in other ways. So we'll launch Steam first, then mobile later. So it will be less challenging. But then success came, and I changed my mind once again. So of course, bigger money and smaller risk. So even if you are not that very successful on one platform, when you are on 6 platforms, you have 6 small successes, and the money comes together. It can be already something significant and big. There's synergy between the platforms. Every marketing push helps all the platforms. So, for example, it was really cool with Insult Simulator. A lot of YouTubers played the game, so when the YouTube video was coming, it was very popular. It gave us a boost of sales in all the platforms, right? So it helped Steam and mobile. So if we would be only on Steam, then we would never use this marketing push on mobile if the mobile will come later. So if you are from the very beginning everywhere, then you can monetize like actually every player, because if the player will learn about your game, he will look for it on his favorite platform. If the game was not there, he will not buy it, right? Especially with small games, probably he will forget about this game after a week. So if you launch after half a year, probably the guy will not know about the game. So you have to somehow show him the game once again, which is not that easy. So if you are from the beginning on all the platforms, you can use your marketing to the limit, and you do this marketing only once. This is really great. And yeah, and multiplayer. So with online multiplayer, we have this problem, like every game has this problem, that people will play multiplayer if there are people who play multiplayer, right? So you have to reach this critical mass of players to have your online multiplayer alive. So a lot of games are launching and they have dead multiplayer at the beginning, and they will never rise up because there are not enough players. So if you launch on many platforms, you can have like small parts of small numbers of players, but if you have many platforms all together, all these players together can reach this critical mass, and maybe your multiplayer will start to work. So this was the case of Insult Simulator. We did a cross-platform multiplayer, so everybody could play with everybody, no matter the platform. So that's why there were a lot more players in the online, and the people were happy. So the online game was alive from the beginning. I'm not sure if it's alive still for today. Probably not, because it's like 2 years since we launched the first game. But still, it was alive for many, many months, at least a year, I think. So for a small game, it's really big success. So that's why I would still say that it's a good idea. It's a really hard thing to launch on all the platforms, but it pays off. Okay, so this is in general. Yeah. So first of all, you should design your game and your game code of your game from the very beginning for all the platforms. Think about all the platforms from the start, because the later you will think, for example, about mobile, doing a Steam game, the harder it will be to later port the game to mobile. Probably you will have to redo a lot of things, but when you design from the beginning for all the, for example, input systems, maybe you will come up with the way how to control the game on all of them in the same way. So this is really good idea to think about it from the beginning. Test your game on all the platforms. If you are doing game even in Unity, Unreal, or whatever engine you have, if you aim for all the platforms, test all of these platforms all the time, not only PC, and then test mobile at the end, because you can end up with, for example, having problems with memory or something like that, which you should know about at the early stage, not at the later stage. So yeah, try to do your game once, right? So if you think about the game from the beginning, for the platforms, it will be much easier. Tweak platform-specific things on the other hand, right? So if you go for all the platforms, you should support them as much as possible. So people will not have like an impression that, for example, Steam game is like a crappy port of mobile game. You should support all the input systems properly, all the features that platform has. So from the programming point of view, we, for example, always divide the platform-specific things to totally different classes. We don't do like ifs or switches that if gamepad, then something like that. No, we just write like a separate classes for separate managers for all the input systems. And that's why the code from different platforms doesn't interfere with each other. It's really, really easier to manage it that way. Okay. So, going multi-platform with Unity, because both games were done with Unity, which is great, but it also gave us some problems, and I will tell you about them and how we overcame these problems. So Unity, like every engine, actually is great, but it's not enough. So this is like a biggest lesson we have after these two games. So what wasn't enough? For example, and it still applies, and I think it applies to every engine. Newer versions are not 100% compatible with previous ones. They should be, but they are not. So for example, we had this case a lot of times that we update the game and they update the engine and the game breaks in some places. So we have a rule that we don't update engine version at least 2 or 3 months before launch. We just freeze it and stay with this engine forever. Because if you change your engine version, you have to actually test your game from the beginning on all the platforms once again. So it is at a big cost, and probably some things will not work. So the cost is much bigger later. So it's a good idea. But problems it brings us is that new fixes that are introduced in newer version of the engine are not available for us, unfortunately. But even if there are some bugs, it's better to have a bug that we know about than to have bugs that we don't know about. So it's not a very, very big problem. The bigger problem is that it may cause problems with platform updates. So for example, we had this problem with Clash of Enemies where the new iOS was introduced. So with that, we had to build the game on the new Xcode. And the projects we had with old Unity version was not compatible with the new Xcode anymore. So we had to manually fix every project, every time the Xcode projects to make it build. So it was like a pain in the ass. We had to do a lot of stupid work because of that. But still, it was less work than updating the engine after the launch. So yeah, you have to remember about it. Don't update like hooray, new version, let's check it if you are close to launch or launching your game soon, because it can break. So resolution and pixel art. So problems with pixel art is that you can scale it only by integers, so by 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So if you have different resolutions, so it was especially a problem on mobile. The only solution is to overdraw your backgrounds much, so it will always have this space around. So on weird resolutions, there will be always some background image. So there's much more work because of that, but you can still manage, right? So, but you also have to have a special script for the camera that will ensure that it's always scaled by integers. So for example, for Crash Enemies, we just had these 4 parts of background. We are moving it to fit it to different sizes of the battles. And also it was overdrawn a lot around, so it will support all the different weird resolutions. Okay, multiplayer. So we are using Photon Engine. I would say that everybody should use Photon Engine because Unity has their own multiplayer engine, but as far as I know, it's not that reliable. Maybe it changed, but at the time when we were doing Insult Simulator, it wasn't that safe. I remember that our friends did the game with this engine, and then they switched back to Steam multiplayer engine because it was much more bug-free. So yeah, Photon Engine is great because it's reliable, because a lot of big, small games use it, so it's well tested, it's proven to be working. It's really easy to integrate. So like only 3 lines of code like that allow you to connect to players, and they can start sending messages each other. So it's super easy. You can do communication via remote procedure calls or component synchronizations. There are some components that can automatically synchronize some components from Unity. What's cool that it actually works exactly the same on every platform. Unity doesn't have but sometimes have problems on some platforms. Photon Engine works. For example, I implemented, I don't know, for Crash Enemies, the first mode of multiplayer, tested on PC. It worked, and then I built it iOS and Android version and iOS version, yeah, and it worked. So it's really good. So you do your work only once. It's cheap. It's not free because you pay subscription for depending on how many players you have, but it's still cheap. So it's great. It also works on consoles. We had some problems with certification on Xbox, but you can still manage it. So since that time, we always go with Photon Engine for multiplayer. And yeah, it works cross-platform really well. So that's also a great feature. So configuration imbalance. So typically when you put data in your game, when you want to configure something, you put your numbers or whatever through inspector Unity. But what if you have large tables of data, many numbers, if you balance whole game, or you have many items and you want to balance them and so on? In inspector it will be really painful. So we decided to work off spreadsheets, and we use especially Google spreadsheets. It's great because you can share spreadsheets among your team. You can edit, all of you can edit the same spreadsheet at the same time. And there are already done plugins on Asset Store that allow you to read these spreadsheets directly from Google in a really easy way. So there's one, we use G2U for general sheets, and one specialized for localization called L2. There are probably others. And there are other plugins to find to buy, but we tested these. For example, in also the Insult Simulator, we had a lot of these parts that you can connect together to build a sentence. So we had to balance them, which connections give how many points. So it was much easier to have a really large table in Google Sheets than to put it in an inspector. You can even write your own rules or formulas directly in a sheet without programming in the Unity. So you can have some calculations in the sheet. Sheet will calculate them, and then the game reads only the numbers from the final numbers. So that's really great. You can actually do some programming in Google Sheets. Okay, so this is it. So resources. Another thing. Typically, when you want to access a resource, you connect it in an inspector in the same way. So again, when you have tons of resources, it's not that easy. And for example, in also the Insult Simulator, we had this case because we had a lot of these atoms recorded by many actors. So we had to, later play them in a specific order. So of course, we could collect them, all of them, through inspector. But if there's like thousands of these files, it's a lot of stupid work that that you have to do. So there is one a way to overcome this. We can create a catalog called resources, and it works like it allows you to access resources by name. In that way, it's the only way to do it in Unity, to access resources by name, like that. So this is really great. You can write your own rules that you find, for example, this VO files by names, and it will work. But you have to be really careful with this catalog, because when you put something, it always ends up in the build. So you have to clean this catalog by yourself, and keep it clean all the time. So yeah, you have to manage it manually. So after building the game, you should always check this build log that is kind of hidden. So you have to find it. I don't know why it's hidden. But it lists all the assets that are in a build, so you should always check it and manage this catalog. So animations. Again, Unity has this great thing called Animator for building blending graphs and so on. It's really great, but it's not great for everything, as we learned. For example, when we had the pixel art game wherein we do sprite animations, when we just switch the sprites, Animator is not that good for that, because first of all, you have to manually create this animation track for the animator. So if you have, for example, many units, as we had in Crash Enemies, you have to do it manually like many times. It's again wasting of time. And also it's not that good performance-wise, because even if you are doing animation that only switches sprites, the animator allocates some buffers for blending and so on. But we don't have blending in such animations, so we don't need it. So that's why animator for these kinds of animations is like a waste of time and waste of memory. It's not a problem when you have 10, 100 of sprites animated, but when you have hundreds or thousands, as we had in Crash Enemies, it was problem on mobile. So that's why we wrote our own solution that was just switching the sprites. It's super simple. Maybe it's not that easy to configure, so we did like some configuration file, text-based configuration file, which sprites are for which animation on a texture. But yeah, it worked really fast. And for example, in both games, when adding a new unit, we just needed to put a new texture, new configuration file, and that's all. Animations worked out of the box. So that's also usability-wise much better way. Lean twin. So there are a lot of plugins to doing this twinning thing, like code-driven animations. But because again, you can animate everything through Animator, but sometimes it's really much easier to just write one line of code that will do like a simple animation, like rotating something, moving something, and so on. So for example, we use this plugin called Lean Twin mostly for UI animations in both games. And it was much faster doing simple animations that way than doing this in Animator or writing your own code for animating this. Okay, UI, another problem. Oh, by the way, this joke will be maybe not anymore valid because there will be nested prefabs finally, but still we don't have it. Yeah, for so many years. So our biggest problem caused by lacking of nested prefabs was that it was hard to maintain style of UI, because if we are, for example, doing a prefab of the button, and then we want to have a prefab of the window that consists of buttons, we will lose this connection, and it will be hard to to manage how your whole UI in the whole game looks like in an easy way. So until there will be nested prefabs, you have to overcome it somehow. So you can, for example, use multi-scene system. Since you can have many scenes loaded at the same time, we, for example, had like every window was on a different scene. So we had scene with UI for shop, UI for main menu was on a different scene, UI for like a HUD was on a different scene, and so on. Thanks to that, like working on multiple scenes was giving us this one more layer of prefabbing somehow. So this is one solution. We also were trying to write our own system that was just, going through all the buttons in the game, for example, and changing the style if you wanted to change it, but it's not that great solution in the end. So yeah, so still we have problems with UI. Using multi-scene system for that helped us a bit, but we still wait for nested prefabs. Multi-scene editing, so I'm telling more about it. It's especially case, for example, with Witchcraft when the levels are really big. So there's a problem with merging scenes, with having a lot of people working on the same scene at the same time, because the scene merging doesn't work that good. So we approach this problem in a way that we just divide our game to many scenes. So for example, we can have a scene with some, singletons in code, or some managers who manage game. We have a separate scene with, for example, graphics, separate scene, many scenes for UI windows. We have separate scene with some gameplay objects, and so on. So everyone can work on a separate scene, so we can easily work as a team, and it works really good. It also saves us build space, because if, for example, you will put, prefab, we will instantiate a prefab in every of your gameplay scene. Every gameplay scene will have this copy of the UI, which is not good because the build will be much bigger. If you will have your UI in a separate scene that you will just load with every gameplay level, you will have this instance of UI objects only once in your build. So when you have a lot of levels, like in Crash Enemies, it helps you to lower down the size. So we also use the, because multi-scene editing is great, but it's also not enough as for me in Unity, because it doesn't remember relations between scenes. For example, which scene requires what other scene to work, and it loses references between objects on different scenes. So we have a plugin called Advanced Multiscene, which solves these problems. It can remember relations between scenes and references. So that's really good to think. So to conclude, you should think about all the platforms you think about from the beginning, and try to do your game from the beginning, thinking about all these platforms. Unity alone is not enough, but Unity plus your plugins, plus your own code, your own solutions, that's a good solution. So don't always think that you have to use some Unity features. Sometimes doing your own solution will be much better for you. So yeah, you have asset stores with a lot of already done plugins, and yeah. So what I told, that sometimes it's good to implement some Unity features by yourself. So thank you.